Lightning, drought, and a dying forest. Then an orphaned bobcat with a torn ear rewrites the rules. How can tiny paws slow fire, call bees home, and bend water to stay? When neighbors demand traps and science demands proof, one small life draws a line: listen or lose everything. Starting now. Dry months stretch so long the creek speaks in a threadbare murmur. Pine crowns thin and show daylight where shade should gather. Bark splits, sap dries to amber scabs, and beetle pinholes stipple trunks like a rash the forest can't shake. In abandoned nests, grass keeps shape, not purpose. The air is warm even in morning, and the soil gives a chalky sigh under boot soles, as if it too has been holding its breath. Ranger Elias Hart moves slowly along the boundary fence, palm brushing lichen as one greets an elder. He keeps records in a notebook. Springs gone silent, trails closed, predator sightings blamed for losses they didn't cause. He speaks little, but when he does, he chooses gentle words, as if not to bruise the place he loves. Downhill, Ruth Navarro lifts a frame from the nearest hive and stares through a pattern gone thin. Honey remains, but the hum is smaller, a tired chorus. They follow the flowers, she says to no one, and the flowers are late or gone. Her gloves smell of wax and smoke. Her livelihood smells like the past. On a dirt road between pasture and pine, Walt Brewer hammers a latch on his chicken run and swears something with tufted ears steals more than its share. He is cornered by losses that add up after dark. He mutters about traps and laws and the right to keep what is his, though his voice is rough. Fear carries it. At the ranger station, Dr. Maya Delgado flips through soil cores and canopy maps that refuse to soften the news. She distrusts easy narratives and miracle talk. Heat is hunger when trees close their mouths, she explains to a volunteer, and hunger invites illness. She will not dress the problem in romance. She is here for the long work, measurement, patience, proof. The volunteer is Lily Tran, 14, small for her age, large in attention. She keeps spiral notebooks with dates, sketches, and unapologetic questions. She is not a scientist yet, but her curiosity watches until patterns declare themselves. She wants this place to make it. She wants to be told that wanting matters. All of them live at the edge of pasture and forest, of drought and memory, of doubt and duty. Their needs touch and sometimes tangle. Ruth wants flowers so bees can come home heavy. Walt wants safety and sleep. Elias wants rules that hold but do not choke. Maya wants data clean enough to stand when challenged. Lily wants a reason to believe that small work is not wasted. Evening folds over the valley with the gentleness of habit. Crickets begin before the light fully leaves. The forest breathes shallow like a patient between treatments. High clouds hold their breath above. A promise rises in the quiet, unspoken but felt. If renewal has a chance, it will come from something so small we almost miss it. Where fence wire meets pine roots, lives knot together. Ruth follows bloom lines like a sailor follows currents. When ridge flowers fail, her bees wander farther and return lighter. Walt counts hens at dawn, jaw tight as the staples he drives. Each loss becomes a number that refuses to clear. Elias reads tracks like weather. Maya keeps notes crisp and refuses comforting guesses. They meet in fragments, farm store, trailhead, the gravel shoulder where the creek cuts the road. Walt wants traps for whatever is taking birds and barn cats. Ruth says traps do not read labels. Elias offers lights, tighter latches, smarter placement. Hardening the coop solves more than what you think is hunting you. Walt pockets hardware and grumbles about predators that never pay. Maya insists on order, no baiting, no hazing, no crowding sites, trying to heal. County officials want quick fixes, tourism jitters at the word drought, and feeds multiply half-truths. She proposes dull measures with long shadows, monitoring windows, pausing off trail traffic near sensitive edges, and non-lethal deterrents for coops and hives. If curiosity churns the ground, we erase patterns we came to read. Lily turns conversation into a school project called Edge Watch. Pins mark where bees clustered, where hens vanished, where deer crossed. In the margins she asks, why are berry shrubs thinning? Why do some bare patches stay damp after short rain? She copies Elias's codes and adds her own, a leaf for new growth, a droplet for wet soil. Questions become quiet help. Rumors move faster than trucks. One post blames coyotes for everything, another says bobcats breed without control. A third accuses the ranger station of secret experiments. Ruth prints a photo of chewed comb. Hunger looks like this, not politics. Walt replies with feathers under the eaves. The thread turns sharp, then tired. Early risers cannot argue all night. Elias walks a legal tightrope. Folks want action that looks like action. He repeats that prevention outruns punishment and still tapes warnings over illegal snares. He hands out zip ties and shows how to set motion lights low enough to bother foxes, but not the stars. Some listen, some do not. He returns the next week anyway, because that is the job. Along the seam between pasture and pine, odd signatures multiply. Clusters of berries lie in dust where no shrubs stand. Palm-sized scrapes pucker into bowls on gentle slopes. After brief rain, those bowls hold a skin of water, while flats turn to ash. Ruth finds bees working near them. Walt notes small cat tracks. Lily measures each hollow and records slope, time, sky. No one claims understanding. The edge is louder than the center now. It is where livelihoods fray, tempers flare, and small signs gather into something that might someday have a name. For the moment, they keep watch, spare anger for the fixable, and avoid trampling what they cannot interpret. They hope the first answer arrives before the next loss, and patience buys the forest one more season. At a sunburned bend of the creek, Elias paused at the smell of damp root and mouse. Beneath a tangle of alder, a kitten the color of dry grass lay curled like a comma. One ear was notched, as if a leaf had been torn and healed crooked. The ribs showed, but the gaze was level, alert, measuring, unwilling to surrender the little ground she owned. No answering chirp came from the shadows. Silence confirmed what the tracks had whispered. This small life was alone. Maya crouched a few paces back and read the scene the way she read soil cores. Fresh prints overlapped older ones, the tiny pads registered deep where the bank slumped. "She's bending energy toward water," Maya said softly. "She's past the helpless stage." Lily wrote the words down, then added her own. Brave, careful, listening. The name arrived in her notebook before she said it aloud. Willow, because something about the kitten held like a supple branch in wind. They argued quietly, because ethics has a voice that does not shout. Ruth, who knew hunger by the sound of a thin hive, asked if they could leave a scrap of meat. Elias shook his head. Handouts tangle the line between wild and wound. Maya set a boundary they could live with, observe from distance, reduce scent, cache a dish of water a long stone's throw away, and mark its placement so they never step near it again. If no adult returned within 2 days, they would revisit the rule with fresh eyes. Everyone agreed, even Walt when he heard later. He did not like predators, but he liked cruelty less. Dawn made the creek a ribbon of pewter. Willow rose, stretched like a hinge, and began to patrol a small radius with method, not panic. She tested wind with an open mouth, tasting what could not be seen. She nosed berries still clinging to a spindly shrub, plucked 2, carried them to a bare, sunny patch, and set them down with a care that looked like thought. On a slope nearby, she raked 4 light strokes, no deeper than a paw, leaving a shallow bowl that would hold a first sip of rain. When she relieved herself, she chose the incline, not the flat, as if knowing the wash would roll seed into shelter. The pattern repeated in small variations over hours. Short visits to fruiting shrubs, quick, clean scat where a fingertip's depth of soil would catch it, Bowls along the contour, never in hollows that would drown a sprout. A mouse skittered. She missed, corrected, waited, and took the second chance without waste. Nothing about her was frantic. She moved like a student of place, not a tourist. Lily claimed the name out loud that evening and pressed a dried willow leaf into her notebook. She began a ledger of bowls with little circles and slope arrows. Elias drew a grid on a paper map and marked water, scat, berry drops and bedding spots with symbols Lily helped design. Ruth visited a thistle patch downslope and found bees had returned to work its ragged purple crowns. She wondered if the damp held longer because of those bowls. Even Walt, walking the fence line, noticed cat prints skirting chicken wire rather than testing it, and, grudgingly, admitted to himself that caution was not malice. By the second night, the absence of an adult was no longer a question. Willow hunted, drank, and slept by her own decisions. The rule held no rescue, only witness. Yet witness reshaped them. What had looked like random scratch and scatter began to read like a grammar of survival written in tiny marks across the land. They did not call it a plan. They called it a chance, hers, and perhaps the forest's. Field guides say, bobcats hug cover, slip in shadow, and bed in thickets that hold the night's warmth. Willow does almost none of that. She favors airy margins where wind travels, especially along the skirts of thinning crowns. On hot days, she rests in shallow, breezy pockets near wind gaps, whiskers tilted into the current. When the breeze shifts, she shifts dens. By week's end, her rotation follows weather, not shelter. Elias notices prints crossing open duff at dusk, a line between failing groves instead of along the creek. She's walking the edges, he mutters, like the edge is the path. Ruth, checking hives, begins seeing constellations of dropped berries on gentle slopes where no shrubs stand. Bees work the volunteer blooms that appear later in those same ovals. Lily tapes ribbons to branches to watch wind. Where ribbons stream near scratched soil, dampness lasts longer after rain. She times it with a stopwatch, notes when the shine leaves a bowl, and draws arrows for slope. Her notebook fills with circles and slashes until Maya borrows it and begins to read too. Maya keeps skepticism sharp. She presses a moisture probe beside a fresh scat on a mild incline, then again on a flat nearby. Numbers differ more than expected. She kneels by a seedling in a scratched basin, its leaves hold while its twin on the flat has folded. She writes micro-topography plus timing, then adds correlation intent. Evening brings pressure. Walt counts hens and finds 2 missing. He blames the cat with the notched ear and tells Elias he'll set snares. Elias explains that snares don't read intentions and that many losses come from raccoons or foxes. Walt answers with the exhaustion of someone guarding what remains. Something's taking what's mine. I'll take something back. The team drafts an ethogram, plain lines, brief visits to fruiting shrubs, scat on slight slopes, shallow scrapes along contour after light rain, den rotation with wind, twilight crossings through open duff, facts that itch like questions. Days later, Lily finds a string of bowls greening in a stitch across a shoulder of the hill. She calls Ruth. They crouch without stepping close. Or the green is a shade brighter than the rest, as if told a gentler story about water. No one says miracle. Maya bans the word. She says, keep watching. Then the jolt. Willow beds in an airy pocket 20 yards from a snag, riddled with beetle holes, calm where a predator might avoid weakness. Maya studies the scene and writes what she has resisted. Too young for strategy? Or strategy is survival practiced well? Her pencil pauses. Either way, the pattern is real. Conflict pushes in. Walt files intent to trap. Elias files an objection. Ruth asks both for a week, one, to try stronger lights and tighter lids. Walt, restless but not immovable, agrees. In that narrow truce, seedlings in the bowls hold color through the heat window, that used to end chances. And that, still more than opinion, keeps everyone returning. The sound was thin and wrong, a rasp that snagged the quiet like torn cloth. Lily heard it near the bend and froze. A second cry, short, swallowed, came from the fence line behind Walt's chicken run. She called Elias. Elias radioed Maya. They met at the edge with hands steady. Willow lay half-curled in grass, one foreleg pinned by a loop of wire cinched to a stake. Not a predator snare, rat wire meant to guard feed sacks, forgotten and hungry for anything that moved. Each flinch tightened the loop. Pads were blood-slick, pupils wide. "Back," Elias said, low. "No sudden moves." Maya set her pack down and spoke for the record they kept. "Human origin hazard. Exception clause applies." She waited 3 breaths. Slid burlap over Willow's head to dim the world. The kitten stilled. Maya's fingers found the loop, felt the twist point, tested for space. Almost none. She used trauma shears to cut the wire, not the flesh. Steel surrendered with a tired click. Elias steadied the stake with a boot heel, voice a tether. "Easy!" When pressure lifted, Willow surged, then fled in a zigzag to the thinnest shade. They cleaned the site, photos, measurements, a bag for evidence, a note for the file. Lily gathered the burlap and breathed until color returned. "She'll avoid us now," Elias said, meaning comfort. Maya looked at the blood darkening the loop in the bag and felt the rule she had bent tighten around her chest. Walt arrived before the dust settled. He saw the bagged wire, the prints, the smear on grass, and read the scene faster than anyone spoke. "You cut loose the thing that's killing my birds," he said. Ruth stepped between angles. "It was a rat wire, Walt, not meant for her." He jabbed a finger at the bag. "Meaning doesn't bring back hens." Elias kept his tone even. "Setting snares without permits is illegal. That one wasn't for predators, but it caught one. We're documenting, not accusing." Walt's laugh had no joy. "You think I won't call wildlife control? You think I won't ask for removal?" He turned away. "You chose a cat over a neighbor." Maya didn't raise her voice. "I chose to end harm we created. The rest remains. No baiting, no following, no handling. One cut, Mum, because the wire was ours." By nightfall, posts framed it as saviorism, betrayal, proof of bias. A crate of broken eggs appeared at Elias's gate. Ruth's updates went quiet. Lily's mother asked her to step back for a week. Lines showed where there had been only edges. Maya wrote by headlamp late that night. "Between clean data and a clean conscience, I cut for conscience when the wound was ours. If that cost is trust, we'll earn it back by disappearing again." She closed the notebook and listened for a cry that didn't come. Somewhere, a fox barked. The creek kept its thread. The rule, remade, lay across her like a measured weight. Do less, mean it more. After the wire incident, Maya rebuilt the discipline of the study from the ground up. She laid out twin plots, paired squares on the same slope and aspect, under the same light. One inside Willow's habitual route, the other just beyond it. Flags were color-coded by a technician who never saw the maps. Moisture buttons, temperature loggers, and light sensors recorded every 5 minutes. No baiting, no luring, no following. The only variable that mattered was a small cat, keeping to her rhythm. Rain returned in teasing slips. Whenever dew or drizzle passed, the instruments woke. In Willow-used plots, moisture curves rose, eased, and settled like a slow breath. In their twins, the lines spiked and fell. Micro-basins that looked like paw-raked saucers detained water hours longer than flat ground. Seedlings under those curves were less frantic at noon, less brittle by dusk. The data did not sing, but it refused to be quiet. Seeds explain part of the calm. Scat pellets collected on gentle inclines held a mixed archive: elder, manzanita, chokecherry. Coats nicked just enough by passage to invite water. When the team sowed those seeds across paired trays of soil, germination favored the trays whose surface had been lightly cupped by a fingertip. Lab plates from Willow used plots showed denser fans of mycorrhizal threads. Roots found partners sooner, leaves held longer, survival crept upward from unlikely ground. Arthropods arrived like punctuation, springtails stitched commas over wet sheen, ground beetles tunneled, ants drew neat sentences between food and home. With insects came the first lift in birdsong, wrens scolding, flycatchers ticking, a towhee scratching litter beside a greened bowl. Ruth stood with veil pushed back and listened. The note was still thin, but it carried. Her bees tasted it too, returning with packs of pale pollen that hadn't shown all summer. Lily built a poster from field notebooks and logged hours at the table trimming graphs. She called the project Pattern with a Pulse and wrote in plain letters, "It happens when it rains, and it lasts a little longer where the bowls are." In the gym, under humming lights, she explained slopes and seed coats without apology. The principal shook her hand. Walt watched from the bleachers, arms folded, a frown that hid loosening. Attention followed the poster home. A blog framed Willow as a forest savior, a hashtag climbed, vans with rooftop tents appeared at pullouts, footsteps pressed new hardness into soil, dogs ranged off leash, sweet fruit and breadcrumbs appeared near clearings no one should have approached. Maya posted a single statement, "This is process, not miracle. Please keep distance, stay on trails, and give the land quiet." Elias rewrote a footpath and fastened signs that simply read, "Hush." The pattern held, despite the noise, pulsing with each storm. It was never dramatic. It was steady. Water slowed, fungi stitched, seeds took, insects worked, birds carried. The chain was not a prophecy. It was an invitation to continue if people learned to do less so that living things could do more. Ozone pricked the afternoon like needles, thunderheads rose without rain, and a white bolt walked down the far ridge. A breath later, smoke unfurled, thin as thread, then thick as rope. Elias radioed the column in, size up, wind, fuels, and rolled toward the glow with a Pulaski and a plan stitched from years of seasons like this. At the station, maps spread across a table. Maya stared at the shaded contours where she had marked Willow's damp seams, those strings of little bowls that held water longer than the flats. Sharing them would expose the pattern they had vowed to protect. Not sharing might cost the young saplings stitched along those lines, and the bees that had finally come home heavy. She drew a deep line with her finger. "These arcs hold moisture after short rain. Prioritize them. Keep this internal." The chief nodded once. Copies ran. Ruth strapped veil and filled pump sprayers with water and a little vinegar to keep wasps off her face. Walt rattled through the gate with a pickup towing a stock tank and a rusted skid sprayer he'd claimed from a neighbor's yard sale. "It leaks," he grunted, "but it leaks water." He met Elias at the pasture edge, and for the first time in months, they skipped the argument and went straight to work. The fire came fast through grass and slowed in the oak litter, tongues tasting at the feet of dying pines. Elias anchored at the road and flanked upslope, scraping line to mineral soil. Eyes on wind shifts. Walt ran the skid sprayer along fence and hive, laying a wet ribbon. Ruth and Lily trailed with burlap and shovels, smothering sparks that jumped like fleas. Maya climbed to a knob and, guided by radio, left around the draw, hold at the seep, tie into the granite ribs. Where Willow's bowls were thick, flame crouched and crawled, losing its appetite. The heat lay down, embers chattered and went dark. On a bare shoulder with no bowls, fire skated quick across powder-dry duff until Elias pinched it against stone. "Backburn here," he called. Maya swallowed the taste of confession and agreed. A thin line of flame moved downslope to meet the head, starved it, and the two died together. Wind shifted ugly and threw a spot over the line toward Ruth's hives. Walt peeled away, tires biting ash, and lumped water onto the grass until the pump coughed air. Lily, hands shaking but steady, pulled a hose from the tank and found Prime, Elias's voice in her ear. "Sweep the edge, low and slow." Ruth spread wet burlap like blankets on embers, smoke stinging her eyes, mind full of honey and years. The spot fizzled to black. Dusk brought a tired mercy. The ridge wore a mosaic, char, shadow, and stubborn green where moisture had lingered. Along one damp arc, seedlings stood singed at the tips but uncurled at the heart. Walt stared at that ribbon and exhaled something between relief and apology. Didn't think dirt bowls could trip fire. Ruth touched his sleeve. They tripped it enough. Maya leaned on her knees and let the ash stink settle into her hair. She had traded secrecy for survival and would rebuild caution from there. Down in the cooling black, a small track crossed the line and angled toward water. 4 prints, light as breath. The ridge, scorched but not erased, held its first clear hope. A week after the fire, a headline leapt across town screens. Orphaned bobcat saves dying forest. Vans nosed into gravel pullouts, doors sliding open on tripods, drones and coolers. Strangers followed Lily's school poster like a leaked map. Off-leash dogs bounded through bowls that held the last thin gift of rain. Someone scattered fruit for the hero. Someone else pressed a phone to a track and left the print flattened. Ruth felt it first in the hives. Bees flew wider, twitchier patterns, irritated by drones that did not drink nectar. Elias felt it in his boots, new shortcuts pressed hard into tired soil. Walt found wrappers in his ditch and muttered that adoration made worse neighbors than fear. Maya answered interview requests with the same 3 sentences. This is not a miracle. It is a process. Please keep your distance. The county manager called a meeting. Liability hung in the air with the smell of burned grass. A memo floated an option that sounded clean on paper. Capture and relocate the bobcat for public safety. We're one selfie from a bite, someone warned. Maya held the edge of the table and said relocation would rupture the very pattern the data described, trading one risk for another no one could measure. They scheduled a public hearing in the library's multi-purpose room. Folding chairs clicked open, posters lined one wall. Seedling survival curves, moisture plots, a map of post-fire mosaics. Walt arrived in a clean shirt. When the microphone reached him, he did not hesitate. That wire was mine, he said. Meant for rats, careless, and it hurt what it wasn't meant to. I'm asking you to strike my complaint to remove the cat. The room breathed out all at once. Ruth stepped forward with jars wrapped in brown paper. Taste this, she said, passing plastic spoons. The honey was light, with a shy, wild mint note no one had tasted since the good years. My bees found something these last weeks, she said. Whatever we do, let's not break the thread they're following. Lily read from her notebook, voice higher than usual, but steady. She did not say hero or miracle. She described small bowls that held a brief rain, and how a seedling shaded its own soil by surviving 3 hot noons in a row. If we make the place loud, she finished, the pattern forgets itself. When it was Maya's turn, she pointed to the charts. We are watching an interaction, not a legend. Protect the interaction, create a buffer where scent, noise, and light are kept low. Signage, reroutes, seasonal closures, let the cat stay a cat. The vote did not clang. It settled. Relocation was tabled. A quiet zone plan took its place. Trail detours, dusk to dawn silence near the moist arcs, no drones, no feeding, no dogs off leash. Signs went in with one word at the bottom, listen. Elias, Ruth and Walt volunteered for patrols. Lily made maps for kids. The library kept the charts up longer. Recovery did not arrive with trumpets. It came as a backing away of failure. On the burned shoulder where heat had licked the ground bare, pinpricks of green pried up through ash. Sorrel unfurled like small hands. Along shaded seams, mushrooms lifted from the litter, amber jellies, pale parasols, round buttons, each a sign that the buried trade of sugars and minerals had resumed. Pools that once vanished by noon lingered into evening, their margins dried slowly, crusting at the edges instead of collapsing at once. In Maya's ledgers, the jagged lines began to curve. Moisture traces from Willow-used plots rose and fell like measured breathing, not fits of panic. 2 transects passed the threshold the team had set for viable recruitment. Seedlings there held through the worst afternoons and put on a second pair of leaves. When she tested soil from those arcs, high-fall strands webbed the dish before lunch. She wrote only numbers, but the steadiness in her handwriting betrayed relief. Sound changed too. Bees returned as a thin, stubborn braid of hum that thickened week by week. Ground beetles worked the dark crumbs beneath the bowls. Ants stitched ferries between seed and soil. A wren scolded, then nested. With insects came flycatchers. With them, a Cooper's hawk traced the thermals over the clearings. Droppings dotted distant logs with new seed, widening the effect beyond any one root. Nothing heroic happened. Conditions simply arranged themselves so living things could do what living things do. The people at that edge changed too. Elias stood at the kiosk, proud without words. He updated closures and added one line to the notice, "Thank you for your quiet." Ruth won a small grant to plant native shrubs along the pasture fence and laughed like someone paying back a debt. Walt replaced the last of his wire, hung bells on the coop door, and set posts for signs asking visitors to leash their dogs. He stopped counting stolen hens. The number quit rising. One evening, after checking loggers, Maya walked the narrow spine between 2 damp arcs and saw Willow ahead, no longer a kitten but not yet heavy with years. The cat was standing in a pool of mottled light, head lifted to wind. They noticed each other at the same instant and did nothing about it. Maya did not reach for a lens. She let the moment stay letterless, and the cat turned her face back to the moving air as if reading it. In the weeks that followed, tracks thinned near the study plots and appeared beyond the far bend. On a sandbar where the creek widened, a scallop of dropped berries curved along the edge like punctuation on a new page. Lily found it and sketched the shape without stepping close. No one tried to follow. Their work had taught them to prefer continuations to closures. Whether Willow stayed or went, the grammar pressed into the hills remained. Water slowed, soil wove, seeds learned patience, and the forest recalled its breath. Wild intelligence is not a blueprint drawn in advance. It is attention tuned to place. Willow did not plan a recovery. She met wind, slope, fruit, and thirst with timing practiced by a body that listens. The lesson is not worship of a single animal, but respect for relationships that once unjammed begin to help themselves. Design with relationships, not just objects. Corridors should follow the lines where animals already prefer to move, edges of pasture, lee ridges, cold air drains. Build quiet budgets into management the way towns budget water. Restrict noise, scent, and glare where movement is most valuable. When human needs collide, route trails around the throats of wind gaps instead of through them, and let the air keep doing its small work. Protect small features that do large labor. Keep berry shrubs at the margins. Repair compacted soil after equipment has passed. Leave the little swales and seasonal rills intact so brief rains can linger. Treat mycorrhizal health as infrastructure. Avoid sterilizing soils. Reduce unnecessary grading, and return coarse woody debris so fungi have ladders. Policy must count at that scale. Governance can honor humility without freezing. Adopt emergency sharing rules for field data that protect wildlife privacy while guiding fire crews to moisture holds. Pre-approve low-tech interventions so local stewards can act quickly after storms. Require impact assessments for lighting and noise near edges, not only for buildings in the interior. Communities hold the hinge. Neighbors can agree to harden coops and hives, tether dogs and bring cats indoors at night. Plant native strips along fences, cap bright bulbs, switch to warm shielded lights, schedule quiet hours. Join counts for pollinators and birds, submit sightings without exact coordinates, help schools adopt a contour, to observe through the year. Many small citizens, repeating small choices, equal habitat. Ethics persists as the spine. Intervene to remove harms we created. Otherwise let wild behavior remain wild. Measure carefully. Publish methods and refuse savior stories. Curiosity is a form of care, and so is restraint. If we protect the conversation among water, soil, seed, and movement, we never need a hero. By season's end, each person at the edge carries a piece of this ethic. Maya trusts process over applause. Elias enforces with a gentler hand because he is backed by neighbors. Ruth tastes mint notes in a jar returned to work. Walt still counts hens, but he also guards the signs that ask for hush. Lily maps a new line of seedlings and writes, simply, beginning. For anyone listening, support corridor trusts and landlink programs, fund microgrants for edge stewards, volunteer for trail reroutes, do not feed wildlife. Donate time, skill, or a weekend to pull invasives and loosen tired soil. Share quiet maps with neighbors. Advocate for local dark sky ordinances. Walk where you live and notice the smallest changes. Somewhere, a sapling will cast a first thin shadow at noon. Keep it company by doing less faithfully.